Welcome to the Make a Mental Note podcast, where mental health professionals share information and perspectives that illuminate, educate, and is worthy of a mental note. And now your host, Chris Quarto.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Quarto, and welcome again to the Make a Mental Note podcast. Well, autumn has finally arrived in Tennessee. It's gotten cooler, leaves are turning colors. And this is the time of year I love taking walks, to just be able to unclutter my mind and commune with nature. If you think about it or have time, take the opportunity to take a walk this week. It's amazing how much simple things like that can enhance your mental wellness. And in fact, studies have shown that taking walks not only improves your health, but also improves your mood and creativity. That's kind of cool. So that's my mental health tip of the week. I'd like to start off this podcast with a quote from Deepak Chopra, which goes like this. It helps if you remember that everyone is doing their best from their level of consciousness. My guest, Jeff Tarrant, talks about how it's possible to not only measure states of consciousness with special computer software, but to help people monitor and alter their consciousness by changing their brainwave patterns. This is the essence of neurofeedback. So I think that you'll really learn a lot from this episode. So without further ado, here's Jeff. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to the Make a Mental Note podcast. My guest today is Jeff Tarrant, who is a licensed psychologist based in Corvallis, Oregon. And Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So
good to be here.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit, where is Corvallis, Oregon?
Corvallis is, I've only been here for about 3 months, so I just moved here, actually. It is about 45 minutes north of Eugene.
Okay.
And about 2 hours south of Portland.
Okay.
So pretty much everybody can orient from there.
Yeah, I think you're on the west side of the state. How close are you?
On the west.
Very close to the ocean?
About an hour from the ocean, about an hour from the mountains on either side.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell
not bad.
Why don't you tell the mental note-taking audience a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living, Jeff?
Sure. So I'm a licensed psychologist, and most of my work takes a few different avenues, but a lot of my work ends up being with technology-based interventions.
All right.
Neurofeedback, biofeedback, transcranial direct current stimulation, interactive metronome, those sorts of things. I have another branch of my work that is more contemplative practices.
All right.
Mindfulness, meditation, qigong, those kinds of things. And then, of course, combining those two where I can. And, some of the areas that I have historically specialized in have been around ADHD, anxiety, and then more recently working with people who have had a recent mild head injury and are recovering from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you do a lot of different things. Well,
I do, yeah.
Well, tell the audience a little bit, how did you get into the field, Jeff? I mean, what's your story as to how you got into this field? Why psychology of all fields?
I haven't thought about that question in a long time. I think, it's interesting because actually in high school, I identified that I wanted to help people, and I wanted to be a counselor. I didn't even know what a psychologist was at that time. But I wanted to be a counselor, and in my mind at that time, I wanted to work with adolescents struggling with alcohol and drug issues. And beyond that, I had no clue what I was doing, and went to college and majored in psychology. And I didn't change my major once. I went straight to graduate school, straight into counseling psychology, got my master's, straight into a doctoral program, And,
Wow.
yeah, it was one of those very strange, like I kind of knew what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the course it took was changed because, of course, I do very little work with alcohol and drug use.
Okay.
But I do work a lot with adolescents. I do work a lot with kids. I work with adults as well, but I have historically worked mostly with kids and adolescents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing because when you were just talking about, you were pretty much on a straight path. And, when you look at college students, the number of times that they change their majors, I think, what is it? About the average number of times is 3 majors or something like that by the time they graduate. So. But you sounded like you pretty much knew that this was the track for you.
I did. It was a pretty much automatic thing. I considered philosophy for a moment. Mm-hmm. Until I realized that there really weren't a lot of ways to make money in philosophy.
Yes.
So I certainly still have a strong interest in philosophy and religious studies and those kinds of things, but that's become more of, and actually those are things I've incorporated. That's actually something I think that I figured out after the fact, that the education that you get in graduate school is really just the very, very beginning. And there's so much out there that you can learn and incorporate into your practice. And that's, I think, one thing I really value about having a doctoral degree in counseling psychology in particular. I feel like I actually have a lot of flexibility around things that I can learn and use and incorporate in my practice.
Yeah. Learning never stops, does it? You and I were before the podcast today. I was just sharing with Jeff that I attended one of his workshops last December. It was a great workshop, and a lot of times there's very little that I get out of workshops, but I got a lot out of Jeff's, and so I think I agree with you, Jeff. What you were saying there is that really learning never stops. And it sounds like for you, and how you described your practice, that you have a lot of different things that you do, a lot of different clients that you work with. And I'm always wondering, in the people that you work with, do you find that there are common themes or common stories that seem to underlie their problems, or does it really depend on the type of person that you're working with?
That's an interesting question, and I probably have a little bit of a different angle on that.
Okay.
Kind of because of the work that I do, I do very, very little of what you might consider traditional counseling.
Yeah.
Sitting down and talking about what's going on. Mm-hmm. Because so much of my work is technology-based, I almost inevitably will end up measuring somebody's brainwave activity and comparing that to a normative database or comparing it to something else to get an understanding of how that particular person's brain is behaving different than what we would expect, based on their age and based on sort of normative groups, and then trying to link that to whatever their concerns are in particular. And so I think, to answer your question, I think one of the things that I see very consistently, almost regardless of what the particular symptoms are, is that the brain and the nervous system gets stuck. Okay. So whether somebody is anxious or they're depressed or they have ADHD, it from a brain perspective, what it looks like is that the brain is repeating a pattern that is not particularly efficient or adaptive.
All right.
And so then my job, my goal becomes, how can I help this brain become more flexible? How can I help it be more adaptive? How can I help it shift gears so it's not just repeating the same old rut of a pattern that's keeping them stuck in the same place.
That's really fascinating. And of course, I'm sure you've been asked this question, but why is it that the brain gets stuck in those same patterns? I mean, why does that happen?
I'm laughing because it's a good question, and a lot of times we don't know. Certainly trauma, I mean, any kind of trauma, whether it's physical trauma or whether it's emotional, psychological trauma, will, can get the brain kind of stuck in some sort of a pattern. And, there's been a lot of talk about that recently, with Bessel van der Kolk's work with PTSD. He really explores that in great detail.
Yeah.
But I think other things like even just toxins in the environment can negatively impact the nervous system and its ability to be flexible. Actually, and you got this from the workshop, that I tend to, sometimes I joke that I should rename my workshop Back to the Basics, because I feel like I spend so much time talking about things like sleep and diet and exercise and these things that seem very basic. They're so basic we don't even pay attention to them anymore. Right. And I feel like the way that our culture in particular is kind of heading, we are creating a nervous system that is stuck and rigid and not adaptive. We're living in a way that is out of tune with the way that our nervous system was designed. And at least that's my opinion.
Okay.
and so it creates all sorts of difficulties. And then I think there are people who they're just born that way. I mean, there are certainly people I've seen where it's like, wow, you can't find anything else, but their nervous system is that way. Here's a good example. You'll see this sometimes when I do a brain map of somebody. And a brain map is basically a quantitative EEG, where we can measure the brainwave activity and then attach some numbers to it so we can see how much of different brainwaves there are.
Okay.
What you will see sometimes is with somebody, maybe they're the child or the grandchild of an alcoholic, or maybe alcoholism runs in the family. And you will see that alcoholism signature in their brain pattern, even though they've never had a drop to drink in their life.
Okay.
And they're just a kid, Now, that doesn't mean that they're destined to be an alcoholic, but they have their brain is already wired in a way that, may lead them in that direction. It may
makes them more susceptible.
Makes them more susceptible, makes alcohol very appealing to that brain. And, so it's interesting, because some people just seem to be wired that way.
Yeah, it really is. And before we go any farther, I just want to make sure for some of the audience members, they might not be familiar with QEEG or brain mapping. So if you could just kind of, because I can just imagine being an audience member thinking, well, how does he actually measure the brain waves and how does that happen? So could you just kind of say just a little bit about how that process works so the audience kind of understands where you're coming from?
Sure, absolutely. So basically, the primary piece of technology I use is a sophisticated electroencephalograph. So it's just an EEG machine. And so many people are familiar with clinical EEGs that you might get in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
If somebody's interested in seeing if there's a seizure disorder or, for a sleep study kind of a thing, where, you're getting hooked up and measuring brainwave activity.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, that's exactly what I'm doing, except I can do it in my office. The technology has become very sophisticated where literally I can fit my equipment in my backpack.
Wow.
And take it wherever I want. And so I can hook somebody up and basically we put a cap on their head. It's called an electro cap.
Okay.
And there's 19 sensors built into the cap. And so we get the cap on just right, and it's measuring the electrical activity of the brain in those 19 locations. So we record the electrical activity of what the brain is doing. So we're not putting anything into the brain. We're just recording what the brain is already doing, the electrical signals of the brain.
They're not getting electrical shocks or anything like that.
No electrical shocks or anything like that. The brain makes its own electricity, and so we're just measuring it and recording it. And so initially it looks like exactly what you would see in a hospital. It's just a bunch of squiggly lines on a screen. And unless you're a neurologist or an EEG tech, those squiggly lines aren't going to mean that much to you. So we use some sophisticated software to quantify those squiggly lines. Essentially what it does is the software breaks down that raw signal so that you can see all of the different frequency components that make up the brain waves.
All right.
Because the brain is making slow electrical activity and it's making fast electrical activity. It's essentially the same kind of measurements that we use when we talk about any kind of electricity, the electricity in a wall socket. It's the same kind of concept. And so the brain makes slow brain waves like delta waves. So that's like, 1 hertz, 2 hertz, 3 hertz speed of brain waves. So it's the speed of the brain wave.
Okay.
And it makes very, very fast brain waves, We don't even know how fast, but, we typically measure up to about 50 hertz.
Okay.
So, it's 50 cycles per second. So what we do with the software is the software is able to tell us how much of each of these frequencies are present in the brain at any given time.
Okay.
So this is how it quantifies it. It gives us numbers. Instead of looking at squiggle lines, it can say this brain is producing an average of 7 microvolts of beta waves. And beta is just a cluster of frequencies kind of put together. So in this way, we can kind of see how much slow brainwave activity, how much fast brainwave activity the brain is producing at any point. And of course, the reason that this is important is because brain waves are associated with states of consciousness.
Right.
And so, depending on what's happening with that, we can get a sense of what's going on with that brain. What parts are overactivated, what parts are underactivated, how the different areas are communicating with each other. And so going back to what we were discussing before, when this process becomes stuck or inefficient in some way, there's problems. If you have too much of a certain frequency or not enough,
right,
or the way that certain brain regions are communicating becomes overly connected or disconnected, then there are issues. And so this is kind of what we're looking for.
Okay. So when you work with your clients, do you find that different types of clients have different types of patterns of brainwave activity? And I think I heard you say earlier that you have like a set of, I guess, norms or something to compare them to. So I guess those are my two questions right there. Do you find different types of patterns for different types of clients? I guess that's the main thing I'd like to hear you talk about.
Yeah. I think I can answer both of those at the same time.
All right.
So there are several published normative databases out there. So researchers have already, collected all of this data.
Yeah.
Where they said, here's a whole bunch of people who we screened heavily that have never had a seizure, have never had a head injury, don't have any significant mental health problems,
Okay.
et cetera, et cetera. I always joke that I don't know where they found these people because I don't know anybody that would qualify. But anyway, they've got this big group of sort of a normative group, what they call a normative group. And so then you get an idea of what each age range, what the brain tends to do, kind of on average. So then when we compare somebody else's brain to this database, we can get a sense of, whoa, compared to average, you have way too much of a certain brainwave pattern or not enough. And this is how we can start to look at kind of phenotypes. are there different patterns that show up with different disorders consistently? And so, the stereotypical brainwave pattern for ADHD is too much slow brainwave activity, usually theta. Theta is a slow brainwave activity, and not enough beta. Beta is a fast brainwave activity.
Okay.
So it's that ratio of theta to beta becomes very important, and actually it's a very reliable tool in terms of looking for ADHD. If that theta beta ratio is skewed, you can be pretty certain that you're going to be looking at some concerns related to ADHD.
Jeff, and before you go on, do you use that for diagnostic purposes as well, or just merely you're trying to identify the pattern and then go right into treatment?
Yeah, good question, and kind of sometimes both. It depends on the person and what they're coming in for and what the situation is. But
sure,
this actually happens a lot. Kind of picking on the ADHD thing. It's an easy one to use as an example, but this happens to me a lot, where somebody will come in and they'll say, my son or daughter, they're 10 years old. They've been diagnosed with ADHD since they were 6, and they've been on all these meds, and nothing seems to be working anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And I do a brain map. I do a quantitative EEG and look at the brain, and it does not look anything like an ADHD brain.
That's interesting.
Right. And so then that starts to raise interesting questions.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily, I will never use a quantitative EEG as a diagnostic tool by itself.
Okay.
I'll never do that because the brain is too complicated.
Right.
However, it can be very useful sometimes when you're trying to delineate what's what. So, for example, that same person, they might come in and they don't have a skewed theta-beta ratio. But let's say that instead they have a whole bunch of extra fast brainwave activity.
Right.
So almost the exact opposite pattern
of
what we were just talking about. Now, that pattern can certainly look like some of the same symptoms. So, okay. Well, so what? So is it ADHD or just a different kind of ADHD or what's going on here? That's possible. But very often, what that fast brainwave pattern is a reflection of is chronic stress or anxiety.
Okay.
Which can also look like ADHD symptoms.
Sure.
So, in that way, sometimes, looking at the brain can be very useful as in sort of helping with diagnostic, kinds of things. But again, I'll also use, continuous performance tests and, interviews of the parents and the kids and the teachers and questionnaires and all the normal kinds of assessment tools. This just becomes another tool.
Yeah, it gives you a piece. It's a piece to the puzzle, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have to see how it all fits together.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I find it very useful.
So you have these people that come in and they'll show these different patterns of brainwave activity, and I'm assuming that they're coming in primarily for treatment of some sort. So when they come in, and I always ask my guests this about what's your recipe for success in getting a person who you start with, who's at point A, and trying to get them to point B, where they've experienced some sort of therapeutic success. So what's your recipe for success, Jeff, in getting a person to get from that point, from point A to point B, with regard to how you use them with this technology, or how you help them with this technology?
Yeah. I think the first thing that I would say is that even though I use these sort of non-conventional approaches, I would say that still a big chunk of it has to do with the relationship.
Okay.
And of course we know that from lots of other research showing that is this type of therapy better than this type of therapy, better than this type of therapy?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's kind of like, well, a lot of it comes down to, can you form a solid working relationship with the client?
Right.
That they trust you, that they're, and that applies here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's of course important, but then, as far as a recipe for success, it of course varies.
Yep.
Not everybody has the same level of success, and
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, and every once in a while, there's somebody where I don't seem to make much progress at all.
Right.
And so again, that's pretty typical for every kind of treatment and every kind of practice. But I would say where I see the biggest movement and benefit is with those clients or those families where they are willing to put the time and energy in to multiple approaches.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of a single approach, again, in my opinion, very often is not going to cut it. It's kind of like finding the right combination of things for the right person.
Right.
And so yeah, we might be doing neurofeedback,
mm-hmm.
but I also might be doing some lifestyle coaching. I might be talking to them about sleep hygiene, or I might be talking to the parents about behavior management strategies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost definitely going to be talking to them about dietary issues,
Right.
and I'm not a dietitian, and I'm not trying to be a dietitian,
Mm-hmm.
but helping them become educated about the impact that certain types of foods or certain diets has on the brain.
Right.
And so sometimes that education can be very useful. What's interesting is, there are an awful lot of people who they don't want to do that level of work.
Right.
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to change your diet. It's hard to change your lifestyle. And unfortunately, there are people who come in and, they drop their kid off and they want me to fix them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, the kid is not the problem. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things going on here that are contributing.
Sure.
And so if I can get them to exercise and use their body and unplug from the computers and the video games and go out and spend time in nature and eat a semi-healthy diet,
mm-hmm.
all of that helps the brain to become less stressed, which then, of course, when the brain is less stressed, it's more willing to shift.
Mm-hmm.
A stressed brain, we were talking about this at the beginning of the talk, a stressed brain is a rigid brain.
Yes.
It's locked down.
Uh-huh.
It's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I feel like we need to support the brain. If we're asking the brain to change, we have to support it. We have
mm-hmm.
to give it all of the
sure.
Environmental things that it needs so that it feels safe and comfortable and nurtured. And then we can ask it to change.
Mm-hmm.
So overwhelmingly, the people who are willing to do some of those things, learn how to meditate,
uh-huh.
Those things, those are the people who have the biggest success. And,
right.
and it's funny in my position because a lot of times they won't necessarily see the role of the neurofeedback.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They notice all these other things. And it's like, I'm not sure that the neurofeedback helped. It's like, and it's like, and honestly, I don't know how much that was the key or
uh-huh.
how much it was just these other things. But in my mind, I don't really care. If they
right.
got better, then it doesn't really matter. We don't have to sort it out and,
yep.
and analyze it. It's,
as long as they improve. And,
as long as they improve.
And, so a lot of the things really, there were two things I kind of got out of that. You were talking about there are just a lot of basics that clients can be doing. I mean, beyond the therapy, the things that you were talking about were sleep, looking at diet. Some of those things that I think a lot of people take for granted really play an important role in mental health treatment. And then I think the other thing that I kind of got out of what you just said is that people have to be ready to change, don't they? That and
mm-hmm.
even parents, you said they might drop off their kid, and and when you look at it, you have to ask yourself as a psychologist, well, how willing is the parent to be part of this treatment process. And I think all parties have to be ready for change. I mean, if you look at that stage of change model, kind of what you see in the addictions field, that people aren't going to change unless they feel like they're at a point where they're ready to change. And maybe you see that in what you do in your practice, Jeff.
Yeah. And especially you were talking about the families.
Yeah.
Especially that, because, if I'm dealing with an adult, by the time they've come to me, they've usually been through just about everything else.
Yeah.
And they are definitely ready, and they're definitely motivated.
Uh-huh.
Now, adolescents are a whole different thing, because, they're tricky sometimes, because on the one hand they're motivated, but on the other hand they're not. A lot of times. And so they're a little bit trickier. They want to feel better, and they want to get better, but they don't necessarily want to stop playing video games,
right.
Or they don't necessarily want to change their diet, or and so they're a little bit trickier. But I totally agree with you that if them being ready to change and at least having an interest in changing is critical. It's
yeah.
In fact, when people used to ask about the success of neurofeedback, one of the things I used to say all the time was that in my history of doing neurofeedback, which is about 16 years, I can think of 2 clients in particular that did not improve at all.
Okay.
And both of them were adolescents, and both of them did not want to be there.
Right.
They were being drugged there by their parents, and and I told them up front. I said, I'm not sure that this is going to be particularly useful, but I'm willing to give it a try. And I learned from that I learned the lesson exactly what we're talking about right now. That now I won't do it. If the
Right.
adolescent won't buy in, I'm like, there's no point in this. This is, and so. I'll refer them on to something else, family therapy or something. So yeah, I think your point's a really important one.
Yeah. Well, in this work that you do with the neurofeedback, what are some of the primary challenges that you've run into?
Primary challenges.
Yeah. When you think of challenging clients that you've worked with in the past, what was it about them or their situation that prevented them from benefiting from neurofeedback? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the couple things I'm thinking of. One is consistency. I've had a handful of clients where, you mentioned at the beginning that I teach workshops and I travel a fair amount. I've tried to work my schedule so that it doesn't interfere too much with my client load.
Yeah.
But sometimes clients have just as busy schedules as I do.
Yeah.
And so there have been times where I felt like therapy was not successful because we just could not get on any kind of a rhythm.
Right.
With having consistent sessions. And, in this case, the brain needs consistency. It needs
exactly
repeated exposure. And, the other type of client that I see that has really presented some challenges are clients that are heavily medicated. And this is something I've just kind of come to over the last couple of years, is that it's interesting. People who are on 4 or 5 psychotropic medications, the brain, that's another thing that seems to freeze the brain. I cannot get the brain to move. Or if I can, it will often go right back where it was. It won't. I can't get it to stick. And so that's another group of clients that I've kind of more recently decided I'm not going to work with because I'm not convinced I can be helpful.
That's got to be incredibly frustrating. for you to see that happen, that you see a little bit of improvement, then it goes right back.
I had somebody a while back where this was somebody who had a lot of very serious issues and had tried virtually everything there was to try, and nothing had seemed to help. And we, so we were giving neurofeedback a go. And this was somebody on a lot of medications. But I thought, well, at this point they had nothing to lose because it was like things were really problematic for them.
Uh-huh.
And so we actually did get this person to shift, and they had a couple of just like phenomenal days, like the best days they've had in 5 years.
Wow.
But then it would go right back. I mean, like literally it would last for like 1 day, and then shift immediately back. And then if I tried to repeat it and go like, well, what did I do last time?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did I do last time? Let's see if we do that again. Do it again. Nothing. So, and so, I tried some other things, and the same person in particular, I got that to happen 2 or 3 times where we got a nice big movement and it lasted a day or less.
Uh-huh.
And then things went back to normal and I couldn't get it to replicate no matter, and so this was somebody that eventually, we just said, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah.
Now, if I would have stuck with them for a very long time, maybe, but, it's hard to justify. I have a hard time justifying that, of saying, hey, why don't you stay in therapy with me for a year and let's hope that this works. It's like, I have a hard time with that. If I don't see some significant movement after, 10 sessions or so, something's not right.
So can clients be on any kind of medication? Like, let's go back to the ADHD example. If you work with a client who is ADHD and they're currently taking a stimulant, do they continue on that stimulant while you're treating them, or do you tell them, well, you really need to be off from the stimulant during neurofeedback? I mean, how does that work? Yeah.
And so, a good question. And one medication doesn't seem to be a big problem.
All right.
It really seems to be the multiple, stacks of meds.
Right.
But it's very common with ADHD in particular for somebody to come in on meds, and perhaps part of the goal is to get off of the meds. And I've kind of gone both ways with this, where they'll just come in with meds and we'll just train with the meds.
Okay.
And that seems to work fine.
Uh-huh.
And because you got a little bit of wiggle room with stimulants, with some of these clients, once they get going, I would also have them do their session first thing in the morning, and ask them to not take their medication until after our session.
Right.
And so, then I'm not really interfering with their medication regime.
Right.
But we're also getting to train without that, as much of that impact. It's got a pretty quick half-life.
Right.
It burns out of the system fairly quick. And so, there's going to be a little bit there, but so then we're teaching the brain how to do it without the meds. But they've still got that. So, you can kind of go about it both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
It really shows you how this field is really, there's a science to it, but boy, there sure is an art to it too, isn't there?
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because, you're talking about brain waves and all this kind of thing, and it sounds very scientific, and but the reality is that there's a lot of art to it, of trying to figure out how do you get that brain to move?
Yeah.
And everybody's a little bit different. And so just because you have the science doesn't necessarily mean you know how to use it.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, this last part of the interview is what I refer to as make a mental note, and it's something that you feel is important for the audience to make a mental note of, and just in terms of improving their mental health or their relationships. What's a tip or suggestion, some words of wisdom that you might share with the audience to help improve their mental wellness, even if just a little bit?
Yeah, I think that what I would do is go back to kind of what we were talking about earlier of, back to the basics.
All right.
The more that we can really pay attention and make an effort to use the body and get outside and, reduce sugar and try to eat a balanced diet, get at least a minimum amount of sleep every night, 7 hours, those things, if we all did those things by itself, I often wonder, how much of an impact that would have on our mental health if we just took care of the basics. Because the research is extraordinarily clear that each one of those things individually makes a difference on depression, on anxiety, on attention and concentration.
Sure.
And so what if you did all of them?
Yeah.
So I feel like our lifestyle is a huge contributor to our mental health and our wellness. And so that would be, I think, for me, if I could suggest one thing to people, it would be that.
And, it sounds so easy, right? I mean, all those things that you're saying is that, I can get sleep, I can get extra, but it just doesn't happen because exactly what you're saying is our lifestyle, we're too busy or we're too stressed out or just not taking the time to do some of these things that we need to do. They're so basic, but they're not that easy to do for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, like some of the things like, people say, I watch TV to relax. Just, pick on TV for a minute.
Yeah.
And, and the reality is that if you hooked up somebody and measured them physiologically when they're watching TV, they are not relaxed. Their physiology does not suggest relaxation; it suggests stress.
Interesting.
And so, what's really happening is that we're watching TV as a distraction, and it's very good at that. And distraction has its benefits, and there's a place for it. But it is not relaxation. And so, even just something as simple as that of understanding that it's like, why am I using TV? What is this distracting me from? And what is the impact that this has on my system?
Right.
I mean, most of the time, if you really pay attention to how you feel after you watch TV, it's like it gets you worked up. It's like it's all sex and violence and drama and disturbing things because that keeps our attention.
Yeah.
But it's not good for us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really interesting. I had never really thought about how that can get you revved up. I mean, physiologically, but it makes a lot of sense. Well, how can a potential client or parent contact you, Jeff, if they're interested in setting up an appointment with you?
Probably the easiest thing would be to, just either call me directly. My line is 573-268-7867.
Okay.
People can also check out my website. There's some information there about some of the things that I do that can be helpful in upcoming trainings and workshops,
All right.
and that sort of thing. So, people who maybe are interested in not necessarily seeing me as a client, but, if they're interested in additional training, they can check out the website. It's just drjefftarrant.com.
Okay. All right. And I'll make sure and put your phone number and website address in the show notes so people can access that if they want to. And listen, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. This is great stuff. I mean, I think that these are more non-traditional ways. A lot of these things that you were talking about today, in particular the neurofeedback, more of a non-traditional way of treating these disorders, but it sure is nice for people to have this option. So thanks a lot for coming on the podcast today, Jeff.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Okay. All right. Didn't I tell you that you would learn a lot from this episode? This is just great stuff. I really appreciate Jeff coming on today. Well, here's my mental notes takeaway. If the psychologist can identify specific patterns of brainwave activity that's characteristic of a particular psychological disorder, Then they can help clients alter the ratio of those brain waves with neurofeedback so their brain gets unstuck and they can function more adaptively. Here's my question for today. How would a psychologist who's using neurofeedback know if a client's brainwave pattern was atypical or, in other words, unusual? Well, Jeff said that there are several published normative databases that contain brainwave patterns of people who have never had seizures, head injuries, mental health problems, and these patterns demonstrate what the typical brain can do. And when Jeff compares a client's brainwave pattern to those of the normative group, he can determine whether the client has too much or too little of a certain brainwave pattern. At least that's my take on it. So interesting stuff indeed. Well, if you like the show notes for today's podcast episode, then please visit my website, chrisquarto.com, ChrisQuarto.com. I'd also like to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast by using an app such as Downcast. The episodes come out every Thursday, so if you get an app, you can have them downloaded automatically to your phone or iPod or whatever mobile device or computer that you're using. Also, do me a favor. Tell at least one person about the podcast this week, in addition to taking your walk. Someone who you think would really benefit from listening to it. Okay, as usual, thanks so much for listening and have a great rest of the week.